Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. It was a normal Tuesday night. After work, I walked to our local pub for food and drinks with some work friends. We met up every Tuesday night and went to the same place. This night, however, was different. The sky was covered in dark, ominous clouds, and there was a chance of rain. Despite the weather, I decided to walk to the pub since it was conveniently close to both my workplace and my home. Upon arriving at the pub, I joined my friends and took a seat. As I was the last to arrive, it fell upon me to buy the first round of drinks. Typically, we avoided taking shots since we all had work the following days. But as I took my first sip of beer, something caught my attention. A beautiful woman sitting at the other end of the bar. It was unusual to see anyone else in the pub during our Tuesday night gatherings, let alone someone as captivating as her. I couldn't help but fixate on her. She had striking strawberry red hair, piercing brown eyes, snow-like pale skin, and wore an emerald green floral sundress. My friends began teasing me for my staring, and to my surprise, she stared back at me with a smile. I wouldn't consider myself unattractive, but I'm no model either. I'm of average height and build, nothing particularly remarkable. Encouraged by my friends, who urged me to approach her, I mustered the courage after a couple more sips of my beer. Walking over to her, I introduced myself. Hi, my name is Paul. Hello, I'm Caroline. It's a pleasure to meet you, Paul. She replied in a voice as sweet as frosting, soft and just the right amount of quiet. We engaged in conversation, and she convinced me to take shots with her. In no time, 6 shots of Jack Daniels arrived, intended for the two of us. I quickly realized my friends had vanished, but that wasn't unusual since we usually didn't stay out too late. I joined Caroline in taking the shots, and I could feel the alcohol starting to affect me. My tolerance was evidently low. We ordered one more round of shots, and that marked the end of my night. I had reached my limit and was as drunk as I allowed myself to be. We continued talking for a few more minutes, and then Caroline extended an invitation to her place. I hesitated, considering my work obligations the next morning, and I wasn't one for one night stands. However, Caroline had a way with words that made it difficult to resist. She assured me that her place was nearby, in the same apartments where I lived. Surprised by this revelation, as I had never seen her before, I dismissed my concerns and decided to go along with her plan. I followed Caroline to her apartment, grateful that it hadn't started raining yet. Stepping inside, our drunkenness was apparent as we stumbled around. We began passionately making out, and amidst the moment, all I could think about was how much work would suck the following day. However, our intimate encounter took an unexpected turn when Caroline abruptly pulled away. She spoke in her sweet voice. I'm going to make us a couple drinks. You stay here, handsome. Obediently, I stayed put and started glancing around the apartment. That's when something struck me as odd. It was peculiarly empty. The living room consisted of a lone couch on which I sat and an unusually long glass coffee table. Though it didn't seem like a conventional coffee table, I brushed off the thought. Soon, Caroline returned with the drinks, and she proposed a chugging contest. It was at this moment that a sinking feeling settled in my stomach, and I heard a distinctive noise, a metal pipe hitting the floor. I attempted to inquire about the sound, but before I could, Caroline pressed a red Solo cup against my lips, compelling me to drink. Something wasn't right. The drink tasted bitter, and its texture felt grainy. Despite my suspicions, I finished the drink, only to discover that Caroline was no longer on the couch with me. Panicking, I rose to my feet and followed the voices that led me to her bedroom. Peeking inside, I was met with the unsettling sight of two large men, dressed as if they were about to perform surgery. Adjacent to them lay surgical tools on the bed. My instinct was to run, but in that very moment, I succumbed to the effects of the alcohol and lost consciousness. When I awoke, I was engulfed in an intense coldness, my face blasted by the afternoon sun. Sharp pain emanated from my back and left eye. Attempting to get up, I realized my weakness. I found myself submerged in a bathtub filled with ice, and a realization dawned upon me. My organs were missing. Gathering my strength, I struggled out of the bathtub, crawling towards the front door. I cried out in agony. Summoning all my remaining energy, I managed to stand, flinging open the door and screaming for help before succumbing to unconsciousness once again. When I finally regained consciousness, I found myself in the hospital, surrounded by the rhythmic beeping of machines and the murmur of voices. Confused and in pain, I inquired about what had happened. A nurse, engaged in conversation with the police, informed me that one of my kidneys had been dissected, along with my left eye. Overwhelmed with disbelief, tears streamed down my face. "You'll need to undergo dialysis until you find a donor," the nurse relayed, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. I sobbed, unable to comprehend the extent of the tragedy that had befallen me. The police approached, and I recounted the entire story to them. They appeared shocked and immediately rushed out of the room. The nurse, perplexed, glanced at me before the police returned with an individual in their custody. "Is this Caroline, sir?" one of the officers inquired. "Holy shit, yes, that's her," I exclaimed as loudly as my weakened state allowed. "How did you find her?" the nurse wondered. "She works here as a custodian," explained the officer. Caroline appeared enraged and frightened, attempting to flee, only to be swiftly apprehended by the officers. As she was handcuffed, she shrieked in a piercing voice, "You should have died in that apartment." The police escorted her away, leaving me in the hospital for a couple of weeks. Fortunately, upon learning of my ordeal, my family rallied around me and underwent tests to determine if they were compatible donors. Eventually, I received both kidneys and made a full recovery. When I returned to work, my colleagues threw a welcome back party for me, expressing their remorse for leaving me with such a dangerous individual. I harbored no ill feelings towards them. Instead, I internalized the profound lesson I had learned. Never follow a woman home for a one-night stand. Stay safe out there. Story 2. I was driving home from a party at my friend's house. It was raining, and I had a nasty head cold. I hadn't wanted to go to that party in the first place, but my friend had begged and pleaded incessantly, so in the end I gave in, but on the condition that I'd only stay for half an hour and then be on my way. That half hour had been a seethingly unpleasant experience. The loud music, the incessant chatting and yelling. They had all conspired to make my head cold even worse. To say I was pissed off would be an understatement. I was driving along a rural road at a pretty late hour. I thought I was alone, but then two headlights suddenly materialized a couple meters behind me. Then this huge black Wrangler came down the road and cut me off. I damn near had to swerve to avoid it. My already pulsating anger finally exploded. My face burned with rage. I drove up to the bastard's window, lowered my own window, and I roared a barrage of the vilest insults I could muster at the other driver. God, it felt so good, getting all that frustration out of my system. When I was done with my profane rant, I sped away. Smirking, a short while after, I stopped outside a small roadside diner. I thought I'd get a quick coffee before heading home. I parked my car and stepped out onto the wet gravel of the parking lot and zipped up my jacket. As I walked to the door, I saw a decapitated rat carcass on the ground. Lucky I wasn't getting any food. I stepped inside the diner. It was kind of dimly lit, and the only people inside were the cook and a stocky, bearded guy wearing a flannel shirt who's slurping some soup. The cook was short, weedy guy with a balding head. I walked up to the counter, and the cook looked up at me. Well, he looked up at my hair more like it, and his already glum expression became even glummer. "What you want, son?" he asked. "Coffee, please." "Okay, I'll go grab you some." I took a seat at one of the booths and listened to the rain pattering against the window as I waited for my coffee to arrive. Eventually, the cook came and placed the steaming hot cup on the table. Then he went back behind the counter and disappeared into the kitchen. I took a quick sip of my coffee. The heat managed to soothe my gunked up sinuses a little bit, and it felt like heaven. It was so nice and quiet in here too. So unlike that shitty party I was nagged into going to. My little moment of bliss ended when I heard the kitchen door creak open. I looked over, expecting to see the cook, but it wasn't the cook. Instead, standing there was a quite tall, broad man with a pallid face and shaggy, shoulder-length black hair. He was dressed in a black duster coat and dark gray trousers. His eyes were hidden behind a pair of deep black aviator shades. In the dim lighting of the diner, it looked almost like he didn't have any eyes at all. Just two black holes bored into his skull. I stared at the guy, dumbfounded. The bearded guy with the soup also glanced up at the pale-faced man, and his eyes widened. He got up and silently walked to the door, and then quietly opened it and slipped outside. The pale-faced man vaulted over the counter and walked over to the door and swapped the sign from open to closed. And then he switched off the lights. The only source of light now was the street lamp outside, streaming in through the windows. I sat there, confused and rather anxious. The man peered over at me, and then he walked up to my booth and sat across from me. Do you work here?" I quietly asked. "No, I've never here before," said the man, his thin lips curling up into a small, almost sphinx-like smile. My skin started to pale, and my heart started throbbing against my chest. "What do you want?" "Oh, I just want to talk out your conduct earlier." My eyes widened as the realization hit me. This was the guy I cussed out earlier. Christ, he'd followed me here. Without warning, the pale-faced man reached over and grabbed my cup of coffee and then poured its entire contents into his mouth. I watched on in shock. That coffee was still steaming hot, but he didn't cringe at all as the steaming liquid poured over his tongue and down his throat. He was drinking it as if it were merely lukewarm. When he was done, he dropped the cup and it shattered against the floor tiles. "Sorry, was that rude?" he said, and then grinned. God, his teeth were nightmarish. They were all jagged and peg, as if splinters had been stabbed into his gums. Now thoroughly unsettled, I got up to leave. The pale-faced man then lunged across the table, grabbed my shoulder, and sat me back down. My heart dropped when I heard a gun cocked beneath the table. "Don't move. Don't make me hurt you worse than I want to," growled the man. I did as told. I didn't have any other options. I couldn't fight the guy off because he had like a full foot of height and muscle on me. That bearded bastard had run off like a wuss, and the damn cook was nowhere in sight. I was completely alone with this guy. The pale-faced man got up and walked around the table and then sat beside me. God, he was massive. I was pressed up against the damn window. Keeping the gun pointed at my face, he reached around and put his other hand on the back of my head. Then he started softly stroking my hair. "You're so gracile. Like a girl. Freckles, wavy hair, dimples, and your lips look as soft as rose leaves. So pretty," said the pale-faced man. He then pointed the gun at my crotch, and all the color drained from my face. "You want me to make you a woman?" he said with a grin. "Fuck. No, don't," I yelled. The man quietly chortled. Then he put the gun on the table and reached into coat pocket. He pulled out a folding knife that was slick with fresh blood. He wiped the blade on his coat, and then he leaned in close to my face. Those black shades looked almost like the huge eyes of a wolf spider. His next words chilled me to the bone. "Stick out your tongue." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." He shushed me. "Stick out your tongue. Right, now. Please." "I'm not going to ask you again." Hesitantly, and with tears streaming down my face, I stuck my tongue out of my dry mouth. The pale-faced man then pressed the blade up against the bottom of my tongue. You know what I'm pressing the knife against. All it'll take is one quick slice. This entire diner will be red and slick. I shut my eyes tight. Tell me that you're sorry. I struggled to say the words. Come on, little porcelain doll, cooed the pale-faced man. Sorry. I'm so sorry. The pale-faced man gave a satisfied sigh, and then he removed the knife from beneath my tongue. The relief that fell over me felt like a euphoria I'd never felt before. The man then returned the knife to his coat pocket, and then he removed his hand from the back of my head. He smiled and then cupped my face in both hands. Now, I hope you've learned your lesson. You shouldn't say things like that to strangers, no matter how pissed off you are. It isn't very polite. Or safe. Would you kiss your mother with a mouth as dirty? He wiped some of my tears away. So, have you learned your lesson? Yes, I replied. Good, little turtle dove. The pale-faced man patted my cheek, and then he retrieved his gun, put it in his pocket, and got up. He walked to the door, pushed it open, and disappeared into the rainy darkness. I sat there, staring at the door, the rain battering against the window beside me. I then ran to the bathroom, burst into one of the stalls, and vomited my guts out into the toilet bowl. Half-digested food quickly turned into bile, and when it was all out of my system, I stayed there, kneeling over the bowl, dry heaving. I took a deep breath and tried to regain control of my senses. I flushed the toilet, stood up shakily, and turned around, and I nearly had a heart attack. He was standing there, leaning against the stall door, grinning at me. His shades gleamed underneath the bathroom lights. "Want me to drive you home?" he asked. I pushed past him and ran out of the bathroom. Then I bolted out of the diner and into the pouring rain. Then I rushed to my car and dived inside. I put the key in the ignition and was about to pull out of the parking lot when I glanced at the passenger seat. I screamed. The cook's head was sitting on the seat. I haphazardly opened the passenger door and pushed the cook's head out of my car. Then I pulled out of the parking lot and sped away from the diner. I didn't give a crap about breaking the speed limit. The drive back to my parents was horrible. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see that black Wrangler gunning for me. I was a complete wreck. My parents were asleep when I got home. Thank God. I don't want to tell them about what happened. My mother would have a fucking heart attack. I need to call the police and tell them about what happened. Crap. What if the guy followed me home and I just didn't see him? Story 3. So today has been a particularly slow day at work, and I've been killing time reading these stories. Maybe enough time has passed and I can share mine. I had this friend who was really into the occult. Unfortunately, I was the one who got him turned on to it. We had a mutual appreciation of the paranormal and all things weird, so I thought the subject would interest him. He started going deep into the subject to the point where he wouldn't talk about anything else. He would actually interrupt a conversation and force the subject back to occult matters. Rude, but sometimes people go through phases where their interest is all they want to talk about. It was a mostly forgivable offense. I think I should mention that this particular friend didn't have a very large friend circle. His depression and introverted nature kept him inside a lot. He didn't have the best luck in relationships with women. His world was kind of small, and I did enjoy hanging out with him. So I did my best to be a good friend. I didn't want to just brush him off because he was acting a little weirder than normal. Honestly, for the longest time, he was a totally normal guy. We'd chat and play games together on the PlayStation. Sometimes we'd go see movies, with my boyfriend accompanying us. We all hung out at the park, we went swimming. Overall, we had a good time hanging out. Things started to go downhill when he started to smoke damp. Personally, I think psychedelics are amazing tools that can offer insight into your life, but they should be treated with respect. My friend got to the point where he was making it himself. Apparently a pretty easy thing to do after a meager amount of research. and he was smoking it daily, multiple times a day. For those of you who aren't familiar with the substance, when you smoke it, you get transported to a different world, an entirely new plane of existence. Your body and yourself don't exist anymore. You're just exploring this alternate reality dreamscape. My personal experience with it led me to seeing a dragon once in this kaleidoscope of a cornucopia. People see all kinds of different things there. Imagine what that does to a person when they're smoking it 30 times in a day. He started telling me things like he was the reincarnated Osiris. He said he was seeing Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the place in waking life. Apparently, he had hour-long conversations with entities in his bedroom, even when he wasn't smoking damp. Of course, I was very alarmed to hear all of this, and I told him he needed to take a serious break. No drugs at all for a few months, so he can find solid footing in reality again. At this point, I was still hanging out with him because he obviously needed some help, and like I said before, he didn't have a lot of friends that could give him that. He was also the black sheep of the family. So I knew he wasn't getting any kind of support from them. He was really close to his sister, and I did reach out to her on Facebook to express my concerns. I pushed her to talk him into getting some psychiatric help because he was slipping past the point of no return. I'm not really sure if she took my messages seriously since we didn't really know each other. Plus, she is at least 6 years younger than us and possibly didn't grasp how serious the situation was becoming. In any case, I'll jump forward now to the part where things start to get really creepy. My boyfriend had made arrangements to hang out with our friend at the park. I didn't really want to go because I felt like I needed a break from him and his nonsensical ranting. I just couldn't deal with it on that particular day. My boyfriend said he wasn't all that bad and we went anyway. We get to the park and he is his usual self, ranting about Egypt and made-up gods that only he knew the truth about, etc. He also had this large hunting knife that he kept fiddling with the whole time we were on a walk. He told us that he had been using it in ceremonial magic, and that it helped to banish negative thoughts. It made me extremely uneasy. He would do this thing where he would take the knife and make motions near his heart or head, all while holding a conversation with me or my boyfriend. I think we were both really on edge and didn't know what to say or do about it. I tried to distract him from doing it by bringing up other subjects that might interest him. But he kept on with his ritual. Keep in mind, we were walking on a trail, so it wasn't like we could just say goodbye then and there. We had to walk back to our car and drop him off at his car. My boyfriend had the bright idea that we should get some lunch after our walk, even though I was doing my best to give him a look that said, "No, you crazy fuck. Why do you think I want to spend any more time with this nut?" But it must not have been very effective, or my boyfriend was ignoring it. Not sure. Either way, we ended up getting in the car to go get lunch. In the car, I was driving. My boyfriend was in the passenger seat, and our weirdo friend was in the back, as we're heading through a busy part of town where all the shopping and restaurants are. I hear the distinctive sound of a belt buckle coming undone. Then I hear the worst sound imaginable. I peek back out of the corner of my eye, and my suspicions were confirmed. This crazy fucker was full on jacking off in our back seat. I mean, pants all the way down, bare ass on the seat. Instantly, I felt sick to my stomach, and all the nervous energy I had throughout the day popped up into my head. I was trying not to shake, and trying to ignore it, and drive through heavy traffic. I kind of had a freeze response, I guess. The whole time I kept thinking about that huge ass knife he had in his pocket, and obviously he was completely off his rocker now. I was afraid to say anything or confront him because I didn't know how he was going to react. This part is nuts, but my boyfriend didn't fucking seem to notice, and the whole time he kept rambling on about God knows what. I couldn't listen because my thoughts were 100, focused on driving and trying to act like I didn't know what was going on in my back seat. We get to the restaurant and my boyfriend runs inside to grab food. I'm left alone in the car with our friend, and I try to act like I'm browsing on my phone when really I'm watching and listening as hard as I can. We don't talk. My boyfriend gets back and I complain that I'm tired. It's been a long day. Let's drop him off, etc. So I drive us back to our friend's car and he doesn't get out of our vehicle. He just sits there. I have to get a little bit rude and ask him to please get out and go home. He gets out of our car and walks over to his passenger side. I start getting really scared and I suspected the worst. He pulled a gun out of some kind of bag he had on the seat and he just walks over to our car with it. I don't know why the fuck I did this, but I was so pissed. I just got out of my car and walked right up to him. I was maybe 3 feet away and could see it was a loaded 9M. I kept asking him over and over, "What are you doing?" Because apparently that's all my brain could think to do. I told him to get in his car and go home. He never said anything during this whole time. Just kind of cried and had this wild look in his eye. For whatever reason, he got back into his car and drove off. I told my boyfriend obviously we are never hanging out with him again, and that I didn't even want him to talk to him anymore. No contact, nada. A few months pass and he occasionally messages me through the PlayStation or texts my phone. He says a lot of random stuff, and I just ignore it. It turns out he moved down to teen near Nashville. I don't know why. He had a roommate, and I think their girlfriend lived there. I'm not really sure about the situation. I think maybe he's turning his life around and getting a fresh start down there. I think it's best to cut all contact and let him regroup. I'm not interested in any kind of friendship with him, and I know he needed help beyond what I could offer. Again, I reached out to his sister and let her know that he had a gun. She managed to get it from him somehow, but it did little good in the end. I get a call around 11 p.m. one night that wakes me up. It's a man claiming he's a detective down in Gallatin. Teen, and my heart skips a beat. I start sweating and immediately ask what happened. Apparently, my former friend stabbed someone to death on Halloween Day. I don't know all the details, and the articles about it are kind of sparse. The whole thing is really surreal, and I'm just left feeling like I'm lucky that I didn't get shot last summer. This whole thing turned out way longer than I meant it to be, but that's the story. I'm still feeling creeped out by the whole ordeal, and I'm kind of feeling sick after writing all of this.